Moonshine Glass Art, which is a small glass blowing studio in Enterprise, Oregon. I'm focused on making glass art for sale locally, and then also doing classes with people. So I have 7 different items that people come in and make with me. It's probably half of my business. I started blowing glass about 5.5 years ago in Wallowa, Oregon, with Russell Ford, who's in the background here. Russell started Moonshine Glass roughly 35 years ago, up on the side of Mount Joseph on Moonshine Ditch, hence the name. And I blew glass with Russell and Jake Kurtz for a little over 2 years, and then Russell was kind of slowing down and ready to hang up the torch, and I was ready to pick it up, so I purchased the equipment from Russell to get the business started here, kept the name Moonshine Glass, and moved it from Wallowa, where it was at that point in time, to Enterprise. So we're 624 River Street, right off the main highway in Enterprise, Oregon. And this is my 3rd year of business, and everything's going great. If you want to get a hold of me to take a glass blowing class, you can call me at 541-398-1108. That's the best way to get a hold of me. And I'm gonna blow a little glass for you guys today. I think I'll make an Easter egg, which is kind of a quintessential item for me because I hide 100 of these Easter eggs all over the county every year, and it's my busiest weekend of the year now, and it really gets the community excited, and I find it very exciting, and it's challenging not only to make all these eggs completely different, but hide them all over the county so people don't just find them the night before. And so I'll make an egg and then probably a pint glass or a small vase. When I say a pint glass, it's like a 20-ounce drinking vessel that is and has been the best-selling item of Moonshine Glass for quite a while. And it's kind of our signature item, if you will. So, yeah, do you have any questions for me before I get started?
Oh, you mentioned before that you might give us a little bit of the history. Do you know a little history of glass blowing? Or?
Yeah, so this style of glass blowing, called soft glass in today's world, is Venetian in its origin. And so, people have been melting glass for thousands of years, but in Venice, about 700 years ago, they developed a way to gather that molten glass on a steel blowpipe, which is essentially a stainless steel rod with a hole all the way through it, and blow bubbles out of this molten glass and apply color in a very fine way to make fine art. And they were the only people in the world doing that kind of glass art at the time. So there's a lot of Italian names in the glass shop, actually. A lot of our tools, like a Soffietta, a Punti, a Marver, all Italian names. They took it so seriously that, in fact, they used to hold their glass blowers captive, and they escaped the island of Murano, whereas it shortly moved to Murano from Venice in the early days of glass blowing. They would send assassins after these glass blowers because they didn't want their secrets getting out. And somewhere along the line, the secrets did get out, and then they stopped killing their glass blowers. But it's very Italian. The American version of glass blowing I do, they've been blowing glass in America for a couple hundred years, but the studio movement was started in the 70s, in large part due to a guy named Chihuly and his cronies over in Seattle and Tacoma, who broke away from some large glass blowing facilities and started their own studios for doing private work. And then that just kind of spread out from there. And it's still a very rare art form. We've got, as you'll see here in a minute, we've got a melt furnace that has a crucible in it that holds a couple 100 pounds of molten glass that is on at 2100 degrees all year long for about 2.5 years in a row. I never turn that down or turn it off. It's and it's a big electric bill, and you have to rebuild it every 2.5 years, and I think that scares a lot of people off. There's definitely an overhead aspect with this business, fuel costs, the cost of the hand tools, the cost of the glass color. There's only 4 suppliers of this glass color in the world. So, and it mostly comes from Europe. So it's very spendy. So you got to work hard to keep it going. And so not a lot of hobbyists do this style of glass blowing. But it's my passion. And thanks to Russell and my friend Jake, when I saw it for the first time 5.5 years ago, it just kind of grabbed me, and now I do it for a living, and I couldn't be happier. So.
All right. Any other questions from the audience? No?
All right, I'm gonna make an Easter egg, and I'll try and shout the instructions of what I'm doing to you. Hopefully you can hear me in there. There's some white noise, so I apologize in advance if it's a little too noisy. Gather some molten glass onto a punty. I mentioned before, it's a stainless steel rod, solid rod. I'll pick up some molten glass out of my melt furnace, maybe 2 gathers of that molten glass, and I'll apply some color. I'll try and walk over and show you what I'm doing as I can. Here's the melt furnace. I dip that rod down into that pool of glass as I'm turning and pick up a gather of that molten material. This table here is called a marver. That's the Italian word for marble. So as you can imagine, back in the day they used to use marble slab. Now we use steel. In this case, stainless steel. It just works better, lasts longer. But you can see here I've taken that gather of that molten liquid glass and shaped it into what I call a finger. I'm going to get another gather of molten glass and apply 2 stripes of crushed up glass color called frit to either side. And then I'm going to cut and slice this piece down the middle, hopefully trapping a little vortex air bubble in the center. And this is just like one of the Easter eggs I hide every Easter. And it's great that I'm making one because I need an example piece for my gallery anyway. So I've got 2 spots of crushed up colored glass here. I've got a bright red and a bright orange. Every time we gather, we pick up more material because we have more surface area. So as you can see, that's more than doubled in size. And I'll just take this gather right here and go straight to that color. I don't know how well you can see that, but we have a gather of molten glass with 2 stripes of color on it. And now where the clear is, I'm going to cut it down the middle and twist as I pull these jacks out of it. Forge here we use for reheating the glass. It's about 2200 degrees. It's a propane forge with forced air. This I fire up every morning. It takes about half hour, 40 minutes to get up to temperature. So thankfully I don't have to burn propane all day and night. This move that I'm going to do next is actually something that I discovered when I was making Easter eggs, just trying to make them all different, and I was just playing. And I was like, what if I do this? And had this really cool effect where it trapped an air bubble in the center. So I'm going to grab that piece right in the middle across the clear and slice it with the jacks, and then pull those jacks off slowly and twist. And not only did that spiral that color up, but it trapped a little double helix bubble, as I call it, in the center that's kind of dancing around itself. I don't know how well you can see that on video. But see, it's still moving. So if I don't turn, that's going to slump. That's why glass blowers, we're always turning our hands like this. You almost never see us standing there just holding it. We're always turning even when it's cold. So I'll let this cool enough to get another gather, encasing that color, and then I'll shape it into an egg.
It's cooler in person.
And hotter.
Neater in person. How's that?
Yeah. Kind of looks like soft serve ice cream.
I'm not gonna like
Only I lick the glass.
You only make that mistake once, right?
So the reason we let this cool down before we get another gather is if you try to gather glass over a molten piece that still has movement, that new heat and weight that you're introducing will throw you off center. So you have to let this cool enough to have some kind of rigidity to it. Now I've encased that color and that design, and I'll use a wooden tool that we call a block. It's made out of fruit wood, and it's got a circular shape cut into it that I can use to mold this glass. The reason this works well is this wood has been soaking in water, and it creates a layer of steam pushing off of that wood for that glass to float on. So notice that wood isn't just catching on fire, it's actually steaming. So that's the shape that I'd like for this egg. Now one of the last steps to do is to take these tools called jacks and cut a constriction line into the base of the egg right off the end of that steel rod. And this will be the detachment location for this piece. I think it's good to look at glass like candy. So when candy's hot, you can move it and smash it and bend it, but when it gets cold, you can break it. So I'm going to let this cool enough to tell this jack line is the coldest, most brittle part of the piece. And then when that is cold enough to break, I will tap this bar here, and that will send a vibration down that steel rod, and when that vibration reaches this weakened, cooled jack line, it will snap right off. So you can see there, it's the finished Easter egg. I chose, of course, two colors that don't strike until the next day, so red and orange look kind of brown today. But if you look into there, you can see the helix bubble in the center.
So do you catch it with something?
Yeah, just right in my hand.
Do you have a vessel or?
I do. I have a bucket here that has kale wool, which is a spun ceramic fiber. And this is what a lot of our forges and my annealer is insulated with. And it's a high temp ceramic fiber that works as a good insulator, so it won't cool this glass off right away. And it also is heat resistant, so it won't catch on fire and stick to this. So every year I do these Easter eggs, I find several new paperweight tricks. because I'm just trying to do them all different, and I make 350 eggs every year. And like I said, every year I find a new trick, so it's kind of fun that way.
How long does it take you to make an Easter egg when you're in full production mode?
I don't really have a full production mode. I play
Spoiler.
every day. Yeah, I kind of refuse to, you know. I mean, I come into work and I kind of have an idea of what I'd like to achieve, but you know, if you really set this shop up for production and set up all those colors, you could make 60 eggs a day. But I don't do it that way. I make one egg and then I start over and make another egg totally different. And it's probably the slowest way you can do it. But it keeps me having fun. And when I'm having fun, I come back to work the next day. So I'm happy with 15 eggs a day. And sometimes there's 8 eggs. It depends on how many people stop by and want to have a beer on the back porch or whatever, you know. So you can see the colors changing. It's no longer glowing orange. The glass should be brittle enough now to snap off of here. So I'll use these jacks one more time to chill that constriction line. Again, making that the most brittle part of the piece. And then, like I said, a little tap on this punty will send a vibration down the steel and just snap it off like that.
What do you do with your odds and ends of little leave-in break-offs?
That's a good question. So the material that's left on the punty gets put into a wet bucket of water, and that water cracks that glass, and it just falls off, and then I save that glass for, you know, you see there's an egg. Those colors, again, it's bright orange and bright red. Those are two colors where the pigments don't brighten up until it's fully cooled, so this egg is still around 1,000 degrees. I'll put it away in a 950 degree kiln here called an annealer, where at the end of the day, I will set that annealer to go down for a 14-hour cool down. And then tomorrow, we call it Christmas morning. When we come in and open that box, you get to see your stuff. And we always high five. We've got to high five somebody. So yeah, that glass on the punty goes in that bucket of water. The water cools it, and within a minute or two, it's just crumbled glass. When we're using blowpipes, like I'll use here in a minute, we put those in a dry bucket because you don't want the water shooting out of that hot blowpipe. Also, getting condensation inside the blowpipe can really cause it to be a hot pipe later. So we do a dry bucket for our blowpipes, and that takes a while longer to cool. And you'll actually hear shattering glass throughout the day when I'm blowing things because, you know, it doesn't go in water and sizzle. It sits there and cools and then eventually bursts. So lots of times people are like, "What was that? Where's my kid?"
At the end, that water bucket ends up with a rainbow assortment of crushed glass at the bottom.
Yeah, it's 99% clear with little bits of color. I used to recycle it, take it to the recycling center. Now I save it because, like I said, there's only 4 suppliers of this glass in the world. And if for some reason the shipping channel is shut down or something, I'll have a ton of punty glass. And I do know some artists that melt it down. I can melt that back down in my furnace and use it. However, it will be kind of hazy, you know, gray, and maybe have some strands of color in it. But it's better than nothing. So I just got to find a place to put it all. So if anybody has a storage
I
unit,
still have all mine.
do you? I'll make you a great deal. Can I bring mine over and keep it with yours?
Oh, I was thinking of
Cut-offs from
Cut-off.
the
Oh, your
pint
trims?
glasses.
Yeah. I'm saving that too. Okay, any questions?
Have you ever done an apple?
I have attempted an apple. It's funny, I've had a lot of requests for apples. I think I've made one apple, and it turned out okay. The tricky part for me was the body of the apple was pretty straightforward. It was the stem and the leaves that I was having a hard time imagining. But people definitely make apples. I have one in the shop that's like a Murano piece. It's just my friend Jake, who introduced me to glass blowing 5.5 years ago, he used to make these big cherries. And so it was like, the body of it looked similar to an apple. It had a really long stem. And one of the reasons I don't venture out, I don't have a lot of research and development days. Because I have a gallery here behind us that is about half full. And I really try and keep that stocked. And if it ever comes to a time where my gallery's fully stocked, and I have, I play around a lot, but not full days where I'm like, okay, let's make fruit, you know. My other things are selling faster than I can make them. So
That's a good problem.
yeah.
So, how long do you think? Give us an idea of how that research and development works. Like, how long do you think it would take you to figure out how to make an apple? Do you have a clue? Do you have any idea?
So Dawn asked how the research and development works as far as like if I wanted to learn how to make an apple. I could figure it out a lot quicker now than I could have 3 years ago, you know, because I understand the glass a little bit better. So I imagine if I sat down and tried to make an apple now, I could probably make an okay apple. And it's, like I said, it would be that stem and leaf pattern. There's a certain crimping tool that you need to make those little leaves that actually have the lines in it. But I think I could make an apple.
Takes practice.
It takes practice, yeah. My version of research and development is when I come upon projects like the Easter egg thing, or I made 100 pint glasses for the county. Every employee of the county got a pint glass last year, and it was a gift from the county commissioners to the city employees. I was really honored to do that because that's our kind of quintessential item. My best-selling item is my pint glass. Probably my lowest margin item too, because they're tough and they don't always turn out 100%. But I did a lot of experimenting with color during that project because I was trying to make them all different. And I found some new tricks, and that's how things seem to come to me. Is when I'm making multiple items, and because I try not to do things twice, I'm quite often finding new color applications. And there's a television series called Blown Away, which is a glass blowing show that I'd like to go on someday. And if I'm going to go on that show, I want to try and win the whole thing, you know. But
So you better be good at everything, right?
yeah, well, you're going to have 10 really solid, unique tricks up your sleeve because there's 10 challenges throughout the show. So something like that, I will have to sit down and fine-tune some things that I already know and come up with some new stuff that I think might wow those judges, you know.
Like the double helix.
Yeah. But I think I'll, let this business kind of stabilize and pick my timing. We'll see. Or I'll just stay here and keep making pints. I'm happy doing that too. Yeah, a lot of it's just, like I said, half my business is probably doing these classes with people. And that is about all the advertisement that I need because we have such a good time. They go tell people, more people come in. And when I'm doing those classes, it's great for business, but it's not great for my gallery because all those items go home with them, you know. So half the time I'm making stuff for other people that never sees my gallery, and that's why when I'm not doing that, I have to really look at this is what I do literally every day. I have a chance to blow for myself. I go to my gallery, I look at what I'm lacking, color, shape, and then I just start making things to try and fill those holes. Speaking of which, so the pint glass is something that Russell and Jake started doing back in the 90s, I would guess. They're essentially a tall, 16 to 20 ounce glass. And I was brewing beer at Terminal Gravity at the time I started blowing glass, and they have a mug club, if you will, there. So I knew about these glasses. I had several of my own, but I'd never seen them made until Jake invited me to come down to Moonshine Glass over in Wallowa, and it just blew my mind, no pun intended, to see how much work and focus went into making this cup. And it is my best-selling item. and people collect them all over this county, thanks to Jake and Russell getting that started years ago. Also terminal gravity. There's not too many small communities anywhere that I know of where people have functional glass filled in their kitchen, and so it's a really special item for us. So I'm going to make one of those now. I'm going to use a color that was one of Jake and Russell's favorites, called Irish. So it's a silver blue, and I'm going to make a clear bubble of glass. I'm going to roll another gather of glass through some silver blue and wrap it all around this piece while it's molten. And as I blow, that's going to spread out like a web. And then at the end of the process, I'm going to turn that silver blue silver with a fuel-rich flame. So that's one of the really special parts about this K44. They started calling it Irish because there was a misprint on one of the labels when they got it. It said Irish. And so they just kept calling it Irish, but it's Irish with blue. But it has a lot of silver in it. And that silver reacts with a lot of different colors, and you can really, it's endless how you can play with it. So in homage to that, I'm going to make a pint glass. So for this piece, I'm going to use a blowpipe. Instead of a punty, this is another stainless steel tool that has a hole all the way through it, and there's a mouthpiece here that I can use to blow. So I'm going to gather some molten glass, 2 good sized gathers on this. I'll shape it, get a bubble started, and then I'll do that wrap. Don, you want to come over here and see this? So if you stand right about there on that little nut, you can look into my mouth furnace. And I want you to keep your eyes on this, and then when I open this door, you'll see the rim of that bowl. So see the back rim of that bowl? Let your eyes adjust for 3 seconds, and about 8-9 inches from the top of that bowl, you'll see the level of glass. What I do is I just lower this into that pool of glass as I'm turning, and I get a gather like that. That's one of the things that I do in my classes because I feel like it's nice for people to see. You can tell them, yeah, I did in there and pick up glass until they see it. And it seems like the light bulb usually goes on a little bit. So I'll shape this glass a little bit. So I'm just shaping this gather of molten glass on the marber, cooling the sidewalls a little bit. And then I'm actually going to blow a little bubble into this glass. So I don't know if you can see this, but I've blown a breath of air in there, and I've trapped my thumb over the end of that blowpipe, capturing my breath, and my breath will expand and push a bubble into there. So we call that a starter bubble. And now I'll let this cool, get another gather over it, blow a little bit more. Alright, so my second gather of glass gives me enough glass to make a good size drinking vessel up. Last time I used a block, a wooden block saturated in water to shape this piece. Right now I'm going to use a piece of wet newspaper that does the same thing. So this wet newspaper I can hold in my hand and use it as an adjustable mold. I'll just come in and slowly roll and shape that piece in my hand. You can see that layer of steam. And now I'll continue to blow this bubble out a little bit more. See that bubble grow there? so that bubble is blown out enough now to where I can start a constriction line. As we make these glasses, the walls get thinner and they cool faster, so the trips to the forge increase quite a bit, and we're doing a lot of back and forth from the bench to the forge. So I'm going to cut this constriction line in just off the end of the blowpipe through that bubble. This will end up being the break-off point for this piece, and also eventually become the lip of this cup. We don't break the piece off from here and put it away. We break it off after attaching a puntee to the bottom so I can do some surgery to that lip and spread it out into a nice vessel, which you'll see here in a minute. I call it a transfer. So I've established that jack line. I'm going to blow a little more. Okay, so my bubble's about halfway blown out. I'm going to hang this piece up on a pipe hanger and get my gather glass for my silver blue wrap. So I'll get a gather of molten glass on the end of a puntee, maybe two. So I'll start with a small gather, which I cool, and then I'll quickly get another gather and roll it through that blue. And while I'm rolling it through this silver blue, I'll also shape it into a point. This molten glass fuses to that broken up colored glass called frit. Now I'm going to enter the forge with that wrap and hold my piece while keeping it hot at the same time. And then I'll come back to the bench and take this molten wrap of silver blue and spin it around all over this bubble. So, just like this, we come in and paint on a web of color. Just like that. So now I'm back to the heat to melt that wrap into that cold piece, and I'll continue the blowing process. This is one of my favorite styles of cups, just because of how fun it is to take that molten glass and wrap it around like that. It still just amazes me every time that you can do that. And also to be able to make the silver come through at the end is really fun. So I've got it molten hot again. I'll check in on this jack line, make sure that it's cool enough to not expand while I blow. Also, you want a nice sharp jack line be able to break free with a gentle tap. So now I'll blow a little more. Now more heat. I don't know how well you can see from there, but I have a round bubble and I want a cylinder. So I'm going to use a little centrifugal force to swing this out and stretch that round bubble into a cylinder shape. So I get it hot to the molten state again. And now I swing it like a pendulum, and gravity and centrifugal force are working for me, stretching that into a cylinder. Again, reestablish that jack line, make sure I have a nice sharp line established. A little bit of beeswax here for lubrication. We're getting there. I want that bottom just a little bit thinner. My top of my cup, I have the thickness established that I'd like, so I'm not going to heat that as much. I'm heating mostly the bottom of this bubble where it's a little thicker. I'll elongate it a little bit more, and then I'll flatten the bottom of that bubble. So a nice swing here. I'll use the newspaper here to cool the sides of that piece, and then blow one more time. I'm cooling the sides, so when I blow here, the bottom goes, not the sides. Like so. So I'll use this wooden paddle in a second to flatten the bottom of this bubble right here. Give that a nice flash. Focus the heat on the bottom of the bubble so it squishes flat and the rest of the cup stays where I want it to. Down the piece, make sure that I'm putting this bottom on nice and straight. No one wants a leaning cup. And I'll use this graphite finger here to push the bottom in a little bit. I finish my vessels with a stamp, and I don't want that stamp protruding and hitting the table. So there's the body of the vessel. I'll flash it in the forge again, and now I'm going to break it free of the blowpipe. This is what I was describing earlier. It's called the transfer. So I give it a heat there in the forge so it will survive this weight. I'll hang it here. I'll grab a small gather of glass on a punty, and I'll shape that small gather into a point. We also call that a punty. It's a punty on a punty. We want about a 1/4 inch of glass off the end, slightly tapered like so. Now I'll grab my piece, give it another quick flash in the forge, keep my punty hot, and then I'll come to the bench, find a resting spot for this piece where it doesn't want to roll all over, right about there. I'll grab these tweezers and grab a hold of my punty and attach it to the bottom. It instantly fuses to the piece. Now I'm cooling that neckline a little bit more. I'm also stretching my punty off with my left hand so I can put a miniature constriction, basically a version of that jack line, on that puntee, and that leaves me a button of glass behind for my stamp. Now I dip my hand in water. I put a couple of drips of water right on that cooled neckline, and then a tap sends a vibration through the steel and breaks it free of the blowpipe like that. Thank you, sir. So I'm back to the heat quickly before I have any additional cracking. It's a little tricky to get the heat just right for that transfer where it breaks on that cooled line and nowhere else. So I'm getting the lip, which is the area on that broken neckline, molten hot. I'm going to stretch that lip out and cut it off. And then I'm going to finally open this up into a drinking vessel. The reason we do this is to establish a thickness that we like and get rid of tool marks if there are any. So I'll use these tweezers here to stretch that lip out, make sure my bottom's sitting straight, come in and just do little pinches and pulls here. And I'm paying close attention to the thickness of the glass right below these tweeze marks, because that's going to be the finished lip. So about like that, I stretched it out. Now I'll heat it up and cut it off. So to cut the lip off, I use a small pair of shears. And I enter that opening at an angle, and then I straighten out and follow that line until I meet it again. Just like that. And now I'll heat that lip area again one more time. And the tools called jacks that I use to cut that constriction line in with, I'll hold them horizontally and enter the opening of this piece and apply a little pressure. It's kind of like turning pottery a little bit. So I'll enter that opening and just apply gentle pressure as I'm turning. Try to get a nice, evenly shaped piece. Hit it with the back of my jacks there, make sure it's nice and straight. And I'll do one more opening for this piece. I use this torch to heat the puntee a little bit. Nice gentle pressure, giving that lip a little bit of flair. Okay, there's a finished cup. I just have to break it off with this puntee. I'm going to use this torch to turn it silver first. So one small drop of water right on that punty constriction shocks that punty, makes it cold enough to break free. And now I'll use this small torch to get that button of glass hot. And I have a stamp here that I carved out of graphite 5 years ago.
My graphite.
Russell's graphite. It looks like the head of Wallowa Lake. So I put that image into the bottom of the glass. And then I'll grab these tongs and gloves and put it away before it gets too cold and cracks. See if I can walk it by you so you can see what it looks like here. So it's a nice bright silver on the outside with a kind of cobalt bluish green on the inside. Oh, thank you. Oh, good job.
Makes me wonder how often you burn yourself.
Once a day.
Once a day, I bet. With that wet newspaper rubbing that hot
Yeah,
glass.
you don't. I don't get burned too often. If I do, they're small little burns from like touching a tool that's hot or something. And as you see, I'm not covered with scars. So
You learn.
And I see a Crocs on. So.
yeah, Russell blue glass and burn stock. So
Whoa.
I always cut myself.
Cut yourself.
Yeah. I think that's probably more common for a glassblower to cut themselves, especially if they're doing cold working when they're grinding the glass and stuff. Once you've done it for a few years, you kind of learn not to touch the hot stuff. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I saw you sort of leaning over.
Yeah.
You know, you must probably have pretty good awareness of your space.
I try.
Yeah.
It's all a certain set of dance moves that you kind of get down.
Sure.
Yeah.
Muscle memory. Well, that was an excellent demonstration.
I hope that everybody can hear okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. You can't see this on camera, but there's about 80 people behind you here. Thanks for joining.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah,